Step back with me into the Middle Ages, a time when Europe was alive with faith, ambition, and a hunger to touch the heavens. Between the 11th and 16th centuries, across towns and cities, something extraordinary was happening. Massive Gothic cathedrals began to rise, not just buildings of stone and timber, but living monuments to God, power, and human determination. They weren't built in a year or even a decade. Many of these cathedrals took over 50, sometimes 100 years to complete. Whole generations were born, lived, and died beneath scaffolding, never seeing the final masterpiece finished. And yet today, millions of people travel the world to stand in awe, gazing up at the soaring spires of Notre Dame, Chartres, Canterbury, and Cologne. Wondering, how on earth did medieval people build such wonders without machines or modern technology? Well, let's find out. The birth of a dream. In the 11th century, Europe's population was booming. Cities on trade routes grew rich and powerful, but their wooden churches were too small and too fragile. Fires swept through them, destroying holy places again and again. So city leaders, bishops, and kings dreamed bigger. They wanted colossal cathedrals, permanent symbols of wealth, faith, and divine glory. But faith alone doesn't raise stone walls. Cathedrals required money, mountains of it. Rich merchants, nobles, and clergy gave generously. Pilgrims brought coins to churches that housed sacred relics of saints, hoping for blessings, healing, or forgiveness. The more famous the saint, the more money flowed in. Sometimes construction moved fast. Winchester Cathedral was built in less than 20 years, but more often, funds ran dry. At Paris's Notre Dame, work began in 1163 and dragged on for more than a century. The world of guilds. Building such wonders wasn't a one-man job. It required a whole army of craftsmen, carpenters, masons, blacksmiths, glaziers, and laborers. Enter the medieval guilds, powerful organizations of artisans who controlled training, wages, and quality. Joining a guild wasn't easy. Boys, often in their early teens, began as apprentices, working for food and shelter, learning their craft for 5 to 9 years. When they mastered the basics, they became journeymen, traveling from town to town, gaining experience on building sites. Only when a journeyman presented his masterpiece, a perfect work judged by the guild, could he rise to the rank of master and open his own workshop. This was the pipeline that fueled cathedral construction. The carpenters, wood beneath the stone. Carpenters were the hidden backbone of every cathedral. They built scaffolding that climbed sky high, roof trusses that spanned vast halls, and wooden cranes that lifted tons of stone. By the 13th century, oak and walnut were scarce. Builders reused scaffolding, moving it from site to site, recycling planks until they splintered. But carpenters weren't just builders. They were artists. Inside cathedrals, they carved choir stalls, pulpits, and ornate doors, all by hand, guided by geometry, mathematics, and the master mason's designs. The masons, superstars of the Middle Ages. If carpenters were the backbone, masons were the heart. They shaped the very stone. The master mason was more than an architect. He was designer, engineer, and leader all at once. Unlike modern architects, he wasn't sitting safely in an office. He lived on site, directing workers, adjusting plans, and getting his hands dusty. Some names have survived. John de Chelles of Notre Dame, Pierre de Montreuil, Peter Parler of Prague. These men weren't just builders. They were celebrities of their age, hired by kings, paid handsomely, and entrusted with sacred visions. And yet most masons were ordinary men. Their wages were modest, their days long. From sunrise to sunset, they chipped away at stone, carving columns, vaults, and the intricate decorations we still marvel at today. Every mason left behind a mark, literally. On each stone he finished, he carved his personal symbol, proof of his work, and his right to be paid. Those marks can still be seen today on cathedral walls across Europe. A day in the life of a builder. Picture it, Dawn breaks, the bells ring. Workers gather in prayer, led by monks. Then comes a simple breakfast of bread, fruit, and cheese before the day begins. The site bustles with 50 to 100 men, masons, carpenters, carriers, laborers. The air is filled with the clink of chisels, the thud of mallets, the creak of scaffolding. At mid-morning, they pause. The master mason might reward them with a jug of wine. By afternoon, a long break allows for food and a nap before work resumes. The risks were enormous. One slip on the scaffolding, one stone dropped from above, and a man could be crippled for life, or killed instantly. Injured workers had no safety net. Many ended up begging on the streets. Even master builders weren't safe. William of Sens, architect of Canterbury Cathedral, fell from the scaffolding in 1178 and was paralyzed for life. Building cathedrals of clay. You know how grand cathedrals are made of stone, right? Well, not exactly. Back in the 12th century, folks in France and England started using a different material, sun-dried bricks. They mixed clay, sand, and straw, then dried them out in the sun. Voila, bricks. These bad boys were so sturdy that some buildings made of them stood for over 400 years. These cathedrals were way cheaper to make and quicker too. But don't go thinking they were some flimsy shacks. No way. They had thick walls and pointy arches just like the real deal. Plus, to make up for not having stone, they used big wooden beams and lots of decorative brickwork. They even experimented with adding thin stone faces to give them a fancier look. Sadly, not many of these clay cathedrals are around today. People started using stronger bricks made by baking them in a kiln. And that meant the end of the clay cathedrals. But hey, they left us with some pretty cool history. The human cost of glory. For decades, silence was enforced on work sites. Talking was forbidden. Fines awaited those who broke the rule. Maybe it was for concentration, maybe for discipline. But in that silence, only the sound of tools echoed through the air. And yet, despite hardship, danger, and endless years of toil, there was pride. Workers believed their labor brought them closer to God. Each stone lifted, each carving finished, was an offering of faith. Some masons even carved their frustration into the stone itself. Grotesque faces and grimacing heads, tucked into corners of cathedrals, forever mocking the weight they carried. A legacy in stone and glass. The result? Cathedrals that seem to defy gravity. Vaults that soar heavenward. Towers that pierce the sky. Stained glass windows that catch the light like jewels, filling the space with divine color. These were not just buildings. They were prayers in stone. Each block, each carving, each window pane a cry of devotion from the medieval world. And today, centuries later, these masterpieces still stand. Tourists crane their necks upward, just as the faithful once did, struck dumb with awe. Without the sweat, skill, and sacrifice of countless medieval workers, from humble laborer to genius master mason, these wonders of Gothic architecture would never have existed. They are the eternal stairways to heaven, reminders of an age when faith and ambition combined to build miracles from stone. This was medieval madness. Until next time, keep looking up and marvel at what human hands, guided by faith, can create.